My name's Chris. I run an agency called One Further. And yeah, what we're going to talk about today is digital ads automation, specifically for arts marketers, because arts marketers are important. And the business of marketing the arts has got all sorts of weird and wonderful things about it that just make it a little bit more special. So the common tools out there like Facebook ads and Google ads have all this functionality. Some of it is great stuff you can take advantage of. Some of it, not quite so much. A little bit about One Further. So One Further is a digital consultancy. We do a lot of work around web analytics, particularly Google Analytics 4 at the moment. We work on digital content strategy, and we also manage ad campaigns, particularly Google ad grants at the moment. And we work with galleries, historic houses, theatres, you name it. We've got quite a large spread across from managing those kinds of campaigns. Enough about that. So the main message about that to get over to you today is that digital advertising is getting easier thanks to some of the new functionality and features that are being made available. There is a big but that goes along with some of that, and so I'm going to take you through some of the pitfalls and some of the areas where the platform's intentions don't necessarily line up with what's valuable for you as an arts marketer. The good news is there's a happy ending. So there's plenty of good stuff that you can make use of that can land you some good results, can save you some time. And so I've got some takeaways to give you a bit of a steer as to what that might be. So the first point to mention is digital advertising is getting easier. It's in the platform's interest to make it as easy as possible for you to set up campaigns and give them money, essentially. So the ad platforms, as they have evolved over time, they started off very simple, but very limited in what they could do. I remember setting up Facebook ads probably about 15, 16 years ago now. It was dead early days. It was and it was for a music venue, and you couldn't do proper conversion tracking. The targeting options were super limited, and Facebook back then, you were advertising on the right-hand column that everyone ignored, and all the ads were kind of postage stamp kind of size. Rubbish. Over time, they've got more and more complicated. And I mean, if you've tried to make use of Google's ad manager, then there you go. If you've tried to pick your way through the reporting in Facebook ads, it can turn into a bit of a labyrinth. There's a lot of functionality in there. What the systems are trying to pull this back to is to keep the level of sophistication, but the end goal is essentially this: advertising on, advertising off. So that's where they're kind of hoping that you will move to, and this is kind of encapsulated in this. I love this poster from Government Digital Service and some of the principles that that they work to, in this idea of doing the hard work to make it simple. This, when I saw these principles, this is the one that kind of resonated with me the most. A lot of the work we do at One Further, especially around web analytics and digital audience research and SEO and things like that, they can be technical, difficult processes, but it's a lot more impactful if you can take that stuff and simplify it for people and do the hard work at our end to make the recommendations, insights, and what have you simple. It's what the platforms are doing. And so what I'm going to take you through is to show you where there are complicated bits in these platforms that are being simplified as much as possible through some newer functionality, some things that you may or may not have come across. I'm going to look at Facebook ads, I'm going to look at Google ads, because those, we know the primary platforms that most organizations are using, particularly if they're running digital ad campaigns in-house. So in terms of Facebook ads, so the first one up, one of the first things we tend to see is if you're setting up your campaign and you've got multiple ad sets in there, say you've got a pantomime that you're promoting, and within that pantomime campaign, you're targeting people who have connected with you in some way before, have been to your website if you want to do retargeting, people, family audiences, general theatre interest audiences. One of the tricky things was always, how do you choose how much budget to allocate to each of those? It used to be a matter of guesswork. The functionality that we've got in there now changed its name. It used to be called campaign budget optimization. It's now called advantage campaign budget. And the idea here is that you just set a budget at the campaign level. Say, I'm happy to spend £2,000 on this. These are the ad sets that I'm interested in showing ads to with corresponding ads. Facebook, you figure it out. You figure out which ad sets are getting me the best return on my ad spend and funnel more budget into that. It means that you don't have to be guessing upfront and potentially getting that wrong and funneling budget towards audiences that aren't so receptive, or where you can max out that audience far too quickly. And it also means that you're not having to log in every day to find out what the heck's going on and course correct with your budgets as you go along. Frequently, with the speed of turnaround of Facebook ad campaigns, they run for weeks, not months. So there just isn't the opportunity to do that. Instead, set a budget at campaign level and let Facebook take the wheel and optimize that on your behalf. It's one of the simplest ways that you can make automation work for you. The next one is kind of what I was talking about there. It's about setting up ad sets that will target specific groups of people. So you might have within one campaign, you might think, right, there are, I don't know, half a dozen different people that you could be targeting here. Now, knowing the size of the budgets that people will tend to be working for on a per production basis, at least, they tend to be very low. And trying to split that out among multiple ad sets is, and it's starting to spread things a little bit thinly. What we see working instead is running campaigns that are where we're stacking the audiences together. So this is an example of an audience here, which is very broadly looking at people who have connected with you in some way, who are warm audiences. There are people who have looked at a website in the past 30 days, have engaged with you with your Facebook page, or engaged with your Instagram account in some way. Rather than treating them separately, just thinking, right, these are a bunch of people who know who we are. Let's put them all together and treat that as a sort of larger group, rather than trying to split them out and learning about them all separately. So one of the things that, I mean, if you've spoken to a Facebook rep recently, what they're encouraging people to do is to not get too granular with ad sets, put everything in together, let Facebook find out within that larger group who the focus people should be. The other thing that can be a bit of a point of friction with these kinds of things is coming up with a creative for ad campaigns. And so there's been quite a lot of work that's gone into Facebook ads over the last little while. You may very well have seen this, to make it easier to add creative and let the system optimize it for different ratios, with cropping, with brightening images to make them a little bit clearer. You might have seen when you add media these days, it's got the Advantage Plus creative functionality there to let you do things like toggle on standard enhancements. When I was talking about them changing it from like a switchboard of loads of buttons all over the place to just toggles yes or no, this is taking it to that kind of extent, really. So that's the thing. There's also creating variations of copy. We'll see this in Google Ads as well, but rather than trying to create multiple adverts with perfectly crafted copy in each one and hoping that resonates with an audience, the idea is to give Facebook a few options to combine in different ways and try to figure out if it can be done at this, if enough data and enough spaghetti can be thrown at the wall with enough audiences, Facebook can figure out what would resonate best with with who. So it used to be that crafting adverts really was one type of skill. It's almost a different type of skill now, seeing how you can come up with phrasing that matches your brand, matches the tone that you're trying to hit, but has enough meaningful variation in it that Facebook can find what actually works. So there's quite a few options in there. So all the way through from choosing your budgets to structuring your accounts to coming up with visual creative and textual creative. And you may have come across some of these already. Some of them might be new to you. What I didn't cover in Facebook, what a lot of the automation has gone into is shopping campaigns. And so the Advantage Plus stuff that Facebook are building is mostly being built with e-commerce and retail in mind, where what you're doing is you're giving Facebook a feed from your website or from your from Shopify or whatever online store you happen to be using, which will tell it, these are a list of products, these are a list of landing pages, this is an idea of the availability of these things, here is a budget, do thou with that what thou willst. That kind of stuff it's interesting, but it's not really relevant to arts organisations in the same kind of way. The products just don't match up that way. None of the few of the systems that people are using for the bulk of their transactional stuff has been made to work with those feeds. It'd be interesting if anyone did do that and really put their digital campaigns on autopilot. Now, in terms of Google Ads, Google Ads is kind of similar. So one of the tricky things that we always had with Google Ads, especially in Google search ads, which are the ones that show up when you search for something on the search result pages, the text ads that they show. It's always figuring out how much to bid for keywords. This is always a point of friction. First thing anyone ever asked. And it was a box that would pop up to say, how much do you want to bid for this keyword? And quite reasonably, if you're new to running Google Ads, you'd say, I don't know. Like, I don't quite know what I'm getting into here. That was why Google, some time back, introduced the idea of different types of smart bidding, where you can tell Google what kind of outcome you're looking for. So conversions, typically, which might be a purchase, might be filling out a form or whatever the end of the user journey would be on your website. And then introducing targeting that would bid appropriately for those keywords. And again, just to take your hands off the wheel and let it do its thing and see what comes back. So one of the bits of friction as well was if you've got a lot of pages on your website. I mean, think of a museum with an online collection and $10,000 a month to spend for an ad grant, or if you are turning over a large number of events per month. Anywhere with a cinema, for instance, or a large number of workshops or what have you, going into Google Ads and setting up campaigns for those things individually is difficult. Or if you've got an online shop and setting up all the ads for those, setting up individual ads, like you're very unlikely to have the time to do that kind of thing. And so for this reason, something like Google Ads quite often neglected because it's more time than it's worth. The really useful feature here is called dynamic ads, and what this does with Google is it gets Google to do what Google does best. You point Google at a bunch of pages on your site. So it could be a set of exhibition pages. It could be a set of, if it's possible to identify all your cinema listings and cinema pages, or something else, your online collection, your online shop, and say, have a look at all of these pages, any page with such and such a keyword in the URL, have a look at all these pages, figure out what they're about. That's what you do. And then, if anyone searches for anything relevant to this, show this advert, a reasonably generic advert, but an advert nonetheless. So this is really good. If you've not, if you've got a Google especially in the Google Ad Grant, you're not using something like this. This can be really powerful and can save an awful lot of time and mean that you are targeting relevant content to relevant people when they are searching for it. So we've had good success with this with an art centre, particularly with a cinema programme, who previously were setting up individual ads for each of the films that were coming through. And instead, we've moved to this dynamic search thing, and it's delivering good results. We also did it for a theatre. Now, one of the things that we do is, so one of our services called, for Google Ad Grants, not officially, but we call it like our Jumpstart service, where if you want to manage it in-house, but you are doing that thing of looking at maybe a messy account that you've inherited from somewhere else, you don't know how it works, or maybe an account that has never been set up or never been set up correctly. We'll look after it for a few months. We'll get it going. Think of it, it's like teaching a kid to ride a bike. You just kind of put stabilizers on, give them a little bit of a push to start with, and then they can start pedaling. We'll do that initial push over a period of a few months. One of the things that we'll look for is how we can hand over that account in quite a low maintenance way, and using dynamic ads is quite a good way to do that. So we know that when we hand over the account, it will carry on working. We had one, it was a few years ago, it was when lockdown happened. We were managing some accounts, and so we reached out to people and said, right, we're going to shut this down. I'm not going to invoice you. We're going to put your account we'll kind of mothball it, basically. So it's not going to promote anything new, and we'll set up some dynamic ads. And there's one, we never really picked up the Google Ad Grant until fairly recently, but because of the dynamic ad stuff, it was actually performing quite well. They were spending half of the free ad spend they were getting every month without too much input. I mean, there were things that could have been improved, and like when Panto came around at the end of the year and Christmas shows and things, a bit of proactive management would have been useful then. But actually, the dynamic ads can get you quite a long way without too much effort. So I banged on about them quite a lot, but underused feature. If you're not, then hopefully that's one of the most useful things that you'll take away from this. This is one of the dashboards that we put together when we're managing Google Ad Grants, but you might be able to see on this some of the campaigns that we're running on a Google Ad Grant here. It's the dynamic ads that are getting the most impressions and actually converting at a reasonable rate as well. Next one, this is very similar to Facebook ads. Crafting the perfect ad copy in Google Ads was always a little bit tricky, trying to fit the right words into the right boxes and figuring out what works and what doesn't. They've gone a similar route with responsive search ads, where you give it a pick and mix of headlines and descriptions, and you let the machine figure out what combination of them works the best. It's possible to pin particular lines. So in this case, I've pinned Jack and the Beanstalk as a phrase, but it's actually not recommended. They recommend that you just let the system do what it does rather than trying to guess it. But if there is a key message that for some reason you have to mention, otherwise you'll be in trouble, perhaps with a promoter or something, then it is possible to restrict that a little bit. And this is similar with the display ads. Now, Google Display, I think, we certainly found it drop in popularity with arts organisations, because what was going on was people using Google Display ads. Google Display ads show up on websites all over the place. Facebook ads came along, and they were just much simpler to put together, the ad creative in particular. So with the Google Display one, quite often what you'd have to do is brief a designer and say, right, we need, these are the most popular ad placements with different sizes. So like a skyscraper one, and like a little rectangle for mobile, and a square one that goes pretty much anywhere. And there were just too many of these, and even just picking 3 or 4 common ones that should get you good coverage was a pain. And the other thing is you had to make sure that you got the creative in there, you had to get the messaging in there, because there was no text around display ads. And it was complicated and a little bit more costly, having to brief a designer and slower to do that as well. And then Facebook ads came along, said, "Hi there, yeah, we just need we need a square image and a landscape one." And then stories came along. They were like, "Oh, can you check us a vertical one as well?" And that was about it. So, so everyone, I think, for ease of use, started moving over to Facebook ads. Google have learnt this lesson somewhat, and so now they have a thing called responsive display ads, where it's a similar kind of idea. You upload some assets, so some show images, some your logos, some text, and so on. And what Google will do is combine those in different ways, like it does with the responsive search ads. But it's combining them in different ways to find out which combination resonates with people best, gets the best click-through, or gets the best conversion, depending on what you're optimizing for. And we found, like, the first time we tried these, we actually tried, we put most of the budget into, it was an organization that they got a designer to create some Google display ads in the normal way. And then we also included some of these responsive search ads. And it was the responsive search ads that got the better click-through. And the great thing about these is you don't have to put the text in there and everything. You add the text in and around it in the same way you would with a search ad. So that barrier has come right down with Google Display. So if Google Display is not part of your mix of things at the moment and where budgets allow, then it might be worth exploring that. The assets that work on Facebook will pretty much work on Google Display now. And the thing that you'll find with Google Display is you can get tons of impressions for a relatively small amount of money. The click-throughs are worse because everyone ignores banner ads until it's a relevant one that they think is interesting. But for that kind of very top of funnel awareness kind of stuff, I think there's definitely a role for Google Display ads these days. And where this is going with Google, Google got into a position where you can advertise across pretty much any of their properties. So you could run search ads. You could advertise on the display network. You could advertise on YouTube. Gmail ads were kind of a standalone thing for a little while, and they got rolled into the Discover ads, so the feeds that you get on, especially on Android phones. And yeah, maps as well. If you're a petrol station or a coffee place, they're called cafes, Chris. Cafes, then you might advertise on Google Maps. But it was getting quite fractured. And so what Google have come out with more recently, you might have heard of Performance Max. The cool kids call it PMax. And what this does is, this is very much their version of just trying to make everything as simple as possible, make it advertising, reducing it to give us some assets, point us at your website, give us some money, and we'll sort it out. Now, this is the thing that's touting, and this is kind of the logical endpoint of all of this automation as far as Google is concerned. It really is give them the wheel, trust them. They'll and they'll decide for a given campaign whether it should be whether things will show up on search ads, YouTube, display, what have you. Everything it's all your eggs in one basket. Now, Performance Max probably has applications in the cultural sector in some areas. It's suited to much longer running campaigns than we tend to find in the arts sector. What we tend to find is that budgets are allocated to particular exhibitions, events, potentially a season or a strand. But if you've got a producer chucking you a couple of £100 at best when a show isn't selling quite as well as it should do, Performance Max isn't going to be for you. You need to be advertising the same thing over a longer period of time for that. So if you were doing some sort of brand advertising, or if you were doing kind of a longer running seasonal campaign, then it might work, and it might be something for you to explore. But for the time being, we're kind of eyeing it warily as it kind of beds in, and some of the wrinkles are ironed out. There's definitely the endpoint of where this is going. So just to do you a quick recap on all of these things. So we've got Facebook ads and Google ads in our columns here. If we look down the side, we've got the areas where automation has been added in to try and reduce friction over time. So setting budgets, targeting, creating the ads themselves, and where this is all ending up. So for Facebook, we're looking at the Advantage Plus campaign budgets to give them one number and let them optimize across your campaigns and ad sets. And Google Ads, it's smart bidding where you're optimizing around trying to get maximum clicks or conversion value. With the targeting in Facebook, it's all about not being too granular in the way that ads are being targeted and stacking interests together and letting Facebook do the job. The most striking example of this that I saw about a year ago, I think, we were managing some Facebook ads for a theatre, and we saw a previous campaign that they'd set up, and the targeting for it, I don't know if this was on purpose, probably not, but the targeting was based at anyone who was interested in theatre in the UK. And this was a venue that doesn't have nationwide reach particularly. They're not even the biggest theatre in their town. So that seemed punchy to me. But what I was fascinated by was Facebook had managed to find some relevant audiences. And if you looked at the where those ads were being targeted, it was mostly within the organization's kind of catchment area. And this goes to show that, like, if you fire loads of ads, if throw enough spaghetti at the wall, Facebook can sort of end up, given enough time, can start to dial in on the relevant audiences and show the ads to those people based on how they engage with ads, whether they take the activity that that has been set as an objective, that kind of thing. So wouldn't recommend going that broad, but it was definitely an example of how Facebook targeting has been can occasionally be pretty decent. The Google equivalent of this, so Google, I didn't mention this, but Google's, with their keywords, have been broadening out their match types. I'm not going to go into match types and keywords and things, but they're sort of taking control away from how specifically targeted you could be and asking you to trust them and say that, right, we will find, if people are interested in theatre, then just use the word theatre. You don't need to specify that it's not operating theatres. We'll work that out. You don't need to be quite so, you don't need to be too specific about that kind of thing. And the dynamic search ads that I waffled on at great length about as well. On the ad creative side, we've got dynamic creative in Facebook ads, and so that's letting them optimize the creative for you and being given various options that they can pick and mix and combine when it comes to the text side of things. And also, I didn't mention as well, actually, placements as well. Rather than saying we want these ads to show on Facebook or Instagram, we get asked that occasionally. Say, oh, this is an Instagram audience. This show, it's not a Facebook one. It's like, well, I wouldn't prejudge it, to be honest. I would create ads for placements, and if it seems that the audience we're after is clicking those things on Instagram, so be it, and Facebook will optimize around that. If they seem to be clicking those adverts and converting on Facebook, why would we cut them out? And then on the Google Ads side, responsive search and display ads, where the barrier to, especially display ads, the barrier has come right down in terms of how those are made, put together, combined, and so on. And yeah, the end game, they're both coming up with these push button systems, Advantage Plus, Performance Max, that make it super simple to set up ads and just give them the money and go and get on with other things. I would be cautious about some of going quite to that extent. not least because those are mostly built with retail and e-commerce in mind. And the arts, although I sometimes make fun of just how exceptionally different the arts is, in this case, there really are significant differences to bear in mind. There's a but. I told you there was a but coming. So this is Cinderella not being allowed to go to the ball or having to run away at midnight. To do this, you need enough data. And so these systems can only learn if they're being fed with enough data. And so there are two parts to that. One is that you need to be sending data to the system. So if you haven't got the fundamentals of things like Google Ads conversions, Facebook pixels, Facebook purchase events, if you haven't got even like Google Analytics set up properly so that you can, so that you've got a tool that can evaluate different channels in one place. If you haven't got that basic infrastructure sorted, you're going to struggle. But the other thing is this kind of spaghetti at the wall approach to figuring out targeting and optimization. If you're not throwing enough spaghetti at the wall, you're not going to give these tools time enough to learn. So one of the problems that we often see is a 50 quid budget that has to work for a campaign that you want to run over 2 weeks. There's Facebook and Google both sort of recommend there are thresholds of spend per day to get the most out of their systems, and arts organisations' budgets tend to be low and quite often not do that. If it's ever possible to combine budgets together to combine fewer campaigns, probably find some benefits in doing that. So yeah, it means time and money. It means putting budgets together so that there's enough to spend, and also letting that run for enough time that Facebook or Google can do that job of kind of zeroing in on who the most relevant audiences and receptive audiences are. You kind of need the right product. And I say product in the most crass kind of way possible. We're dealing with art here, darling, not widgets. But the product matters. And I know from an arts marketing point of view, it's one of the few marketing jobs where you don't get a huge say in what exactly the product is. You might get a bit of a say in how it's bundled together from a messaging communication point of view, though. So the tricky thing here, like there are some things that will sell better through digital ads than others. I mean, typically with this kind of thing, anything that's an impulse buy is going to do well. Anything that's less of an impulse buy, like a ticket, is always going to be a harder sell, especially in terms of attributing a click on an ad through to someone actually doing something with it. Which is why it might make sense for where possible to, rather than in advertising individual shows, bundling things together. If it's possible to that you've got products or offerings that would appeal to a certain specific audience type, then that can help as well. Yeah, another but is the quality and control. If you're an organisation that exerts a vice-like grip over messaging that goes out with your logo attached to it, then there are going to be some challenges here. If you're putting ads together, all you can really do is approve the assets and approve snippets of copy, and then trust that the system won't do something stupid with it. We've not come across too much resistance to this kind of thing. I mean, it's kind of, there isn't much of a choice, really. But there are sometimes some worries that that these ads it's going to combine things in slightly odd ways, and that's going to have a detrimental effect on people's perception of a brand. But the other but is just the extent to which this is you do it yourself or you outsource it, which don't know, there are pros and cons with both of these things. I am very much of the view that for smaller budgets, it makes sense for some of this stuff to be done in-house, and it's only when larger campaigns come along and the management fee to ad spend ratio looks a bit more sensible. It's worth outsourcing that to someone to do for you. We're starting to wind up. The happy ending, a few takeaways. So the first thing that I would say to you is feed the robot. I mean, to the extent that that is possible with cookie consent managers and devices and browsers being restricting the amount of tracking that can go on, especially Safari and Apple and so on. Get the data into the systems, have that stuff set up. It's often not too difficult to do that. There is guidance out there. There are people like us who can help with that kind of thing. If you're feeling like your setup isn't quite as on point as it could be, but it's necessary to have the data coming into those systems so that you can optimize for conversions, target people who have come to your website and do all of those kinds of things. So yeah, so I would say at least make sure you've got that infrastructure set up. You're doing favors for future you and your colleagues by having that all sorted. I was going to say as well, and like for all these accounts, do make sure that you know who's got admin access to them and all of that kind of thing, and you're not saving passwords in spreadsheets. It's kind of outside the scope of this, but there is some worrying, very worrying security practices going on in the arts. Please don't do that. Password managers are a good thing, and too many people get hacked for them not to be worth their weight in gold. This is actually a post from Simon that was in that I nicked from our Slack account, and it shows the benefit of getting the tracking sorted. I mean, I left in my response because, well, I'm not always. I could have been more impressive in that moment. But yeah, this is Simon posted some results from, this is a Google Ad grant that we're managing. And what we've done is you can see the bar charts on this chart here fall off a cliff quite badly. It looks awful. But the problem is the wrong conversions were being tracked. Things were being tracked as conversions that really shouldn't have been tracked as conversions. And it was giving Google Ads the wrong idea about what it should be optimizing around. So what we did is we fixed up the conversion tracking. And what we found is when Google had the right thing to optimize around, it started pointing ads at the right people in the right kind of way. And we saw that the conversion value, the line, started going up. Fewer conversions, but actually proper conversions now, not junk ones, resulting in actual value. So it works. Feed the robot. It's good. The other thing that we'd say, structure your campaigns well. There are some really simple principles to how campaigns can be structured. If you do it the right way, it helps the systems to make sense of where it should be, where budget should be funneled, which campaigns are doing better than others. At least name your campaigns nicely as well. So that you can make sense of it when you're just checking in on how things are running. So this is an example of something this is an old screenshot of a pretend Facebook ad campaign that I was putting together for a pantomime. Single campaign. This has just got 2 ad sets with one targeting people who are interested in theatre in the local area. This is pretend theatre in a place called Throcking, which is a great name, and a separate ad set for connections with effectively the same ads in both of them. Nice and simple, nicely named, so that no matter whether you're looking at the ad set or the campaign, you know what campaign you're looking at. It's quite simple, but I get the impression some people just haven't seen what a clean account structure looks like. I could go into that in much greater deal in terms of Google Ads, because there's other things to bear in mind there, but I've only got so much time. And then this third thing, be strategic. We all want to be strategic. To explain what I mean by this, think budgets are limited, time is limited. Think it's about investing your time in getting foundational stuff set up, which will pay dividends down the road. That's what great strategy does. It opens up options for you and gives you possibilities. So getting your foundational stuff sorted will pay off every time you set up a campaign. Having an understanding of what a template for a campaign for your organization might look like, so that new people coming in have got something to follow, and instead of having to make it up as they go along each time. Having an idea of how you can use your budgets most effectively, so that you're advertising things that have a better chance of converting and providing you a return on ad spend. But also putting in place and making use of automations where possible, because you've got a brochure that needs signing off, and you need to go and cover box office for half an hour, and you need to go and do 1,000,001 other things. Yeah, how we can help. Sorry to be sorry to bring this back to us. If you do need some help on this kind of thing, this is what we do. This is why we know this stuff. We've done quick audits for people just to flag up where there are gaps in what they do. They're fairly quick to turn around those things, and they're fun for us, where we'll have a look at your Facebook ads, Google ads, tag manager, analytics, what have you, and just point out any issues. We manage campaigns for people. We're particularly keen on Google ad grants at the moment. We're doing lots of those. We've got this jumpstart service that we do for Google ad grants if you want to look after it yourself in-house, but blank page syndrome just means that you don't want to stare at getting it started is difficult. We can start you right off on the right foot. And then we do training, and the thing that is that we'll be banging on about quite a lot over the next little while is Coach, which Simon's just put a link to in the chat, but it's our online training platform. There are courses on there for Facebook ads, Google Tag Manager, the digital campaign tracking one, all super tailored to arts organizations. It's not like, here is Facebook ads and here is all the functionality. Now you go off and figure out what you're meant to do with it. It's a walkthrough of how an arts organization would structure arts organization type campaigns. Simon is just working on our Google Ad Grants one, which will walk you through how to set that up and how to optimize that and maintain an account ongoing. And we've got a whole load of GA4, Google Analytics 4 stuff coming, starting off with reporting and how to get yourselves a nice reporting setup. We're doing quarterly live sessions for Facebook ads, Google ads, and Google Analytics. So for each of those, 4 times a year, we'll get together, do some updates on what's going on, chance for Q&A, bring everyone together for that. Courses are sold individually, but we've also got all access subscriptions, 250 quid plus VAT. You get a login which you could share around your organization. We don't care, that's fine. If you want everyone in your organization to have their own login though, 500 quid plus VAT, and we'll sort that out for you as well. Okay, shiny suit salesman shtick over. Website's onefurther.com. Go and have a look if you want to get in touch with us. We have all sorts of things that you can subscribe to that might be useful as well. We have a cultural content newsletter my colleague Georgina runs, which is excellent. Might just be of general interest to you. But yeah, thanks so much for coming along. I hope it was useful to you. And maybe I shall see a few of you around the place soon. Go. Thank you. Bye-bye.